What if the only way to preserve your soul was to delete your body? In a near future where grief meets technology, a grieving brother stumbles upon a shadowy program offering something no one else can: a second chance to speak with the dead. But the deeper he dives into this digital afterlife, the more he realizes he may not be the one in control. What begins as a desperate search for closure soon unravels into a horrifying discovery about memory, identity, and the price of eternal connection. This is the story of Isaac and the archive that never forgets. The whispering came from beneath the floorboards, soft at first, like someone breathing through splinters. It had been exactly 6 days since Morgan Holloway stepped across the threshold of her grandmother's farmhouse in rural North Carolina, and every night since, something had found its voice in the walls. The old woman's death had been sudden and disjointed, no proper warning, no last phone call, just a coroner's note, a neighbor's concerned voice on voicemail, and the house title left in Morgan's name, a place she barely remembered, tucked somewhere between Greensboro and the edge of nothing. She had been here once as a child, briefly, during a holiday when her mother tried to make amends with the estranged family they never talked about. Now, 32 years old, recently laid off and completely unattached, Morgan had driven down alone in her weathered Toyota, with nothing but an overnight bag and a strained curiosity. She intended to clean the house out and sell it, but something about the place had slowed her hands. The house sat on a narrowing dirt road past a long-abandoned sawmill. Tall pines encroached on the property like they were trying to reclaim it. The porch sagged. The wind chimes didn't chime. They clinked, low and dull, as if weighted. Vines had crept up the wood siding like veins under skin. The farmhouse wasn't simply neglected. It seemed watched over, not by people, but by the woods themselves. Inside, the house smelled like cedar and iron. Faint hints of lavender hung in the air, stubbornly clinging to whatever presence the old woman had left behind. Her name had been Martha Holloway, but Morgan could barely remember ever calling her anything. They hadn't spoken in years. Her mother refused to bring up the woman unless she was drunk and angry. That first night, Morgan stayed on the couch with a blanket pulled to her chin, a half-finished bottle of red wine on the floor. She told herself she would sleep, wake up early and begin clearing the attic. But sometime around 2:37 a.m., the whispering began. At first, she thought it was the wind. Then she thought it was mice. But neither wind nor vermin repeated her name in a voice that cracked like old wood. She hadn't told anyone, not yet. She wasn't even sure she believed herself. By the 6th night, Morgan had stopped drinking before bed. Her phone barely had signal. She'd tried calling a friend in Asheville, but the call dropped mid-sentence. She no longer opened the windows. The trees outside were too quiet, too still. They didn't sway when the wind blew. She didn't ask why. That evening, as golden hour painted the farmhouse in blood-orange light, Morgan stood in the narrow kitchen with a pile of old photographs spread across the table. Most were black and white, faded, curling at the edges. They smelled of mildew and smoke. A few were of her grandmother in younger days, stoic, always dressed in dark skirts and high collars even in summer. One showed her standing beside a massive oak tree, hand pressed to its bark, eyes shut. Behind her, a carved wooden figure nailed to the trunk. Morgan squinted. The figure looked like a man, or what was left of one. Limbs thin, unnatural, its head bowed as though in shame. She flipped the photo. Nothing written. She found another. This time, a group of women in a circle in what looked like the same forest. Each held a small wooden doll in their hands. Their faces were solemn, their eyes were covered with black cloth. "What the hell, Grandma?" Morgan muttered under her breath. As she reached for another photograph, something behind the walls knocked. Just once. She froze. The sun hadn't quite set. Light still filtered through the dirty kitchen window. Another knock. Then a low scratching, like something dragging itself across dry wood. It was coming from under the floor. Morgan stood, heart punching her ribs. The floor creaked beneath her, but she didn't move. Then the whisper came again. Closer this time. "Morgan." She backed up, bumping the table. One of the photos fluttered to the ground. The voice was old, female, familiar in a way that made her stomach twist. It came again. "Down here." There was a trapdoor in the hallway. She'd seen it when she arrived, but had assumed it led to plumbing or storage. A rusted iron ring embedded in a square of wood near the back of the house. She'd never opened it. She didn't want to now, but her body moved anyway. The hallway felt longer than before. The floorboards groaned louder with each step. Shadows had begun to stretch, crawling along the baseboards like something waking up. She crouched beside the trap door. The iron ring was cold. Her fingers trembled around it. Behind her, the whisper came again, right next to her ear. "I kept it for you." She yanked the trap door open. Darkness stared back. A scent rose from below, wet earth and something sharp, like copper or burned hair. She lowered her phone's flashlight into the hole. Stairs, wood, slick with moisture, and something at the bottom, a shape, a carving maybe, standing motionless just beyond the light's reach. It looked human. It looked wrong. And it was waiting. Morgan's phone buzzed suddenly, an unknown number calling. The screen read only, "Don't go down." She dropped the phone. From below, the shape took a step forward. The next morning, Isaac found himself standing in the same living room where he'd left the boxes. But now, they were rearranged. Not just moved slightly, but restacked, as if someone had carefully gone through them and placed them in a new, deliberate order. On top of the pile was the book he'd taken out the night before, the leather-bound one with the unknown script. Except this time, it was open. He stared at the pages, breath caught in his chest. The ink had bled into the paper like fresh blood, forming shapes that looked almost human, but distorted, like the outline of bodies twisted in torment. He touched the edge of the page. It was damp, warm. Isaac yanked his hand back. Maybe it was the humidity in the house. Maybe he was overtired. But a chill crept up his spine like a trail of ants marching straight into his skull. He closed the book and shoved it back into the bottom of the box, then pushed the entire stack against the wall. He wouldn't open it again. That's what he told himself. By noon, the house felt colder than it should. The fireplace remained empty, the air thick with something stale and heavy. He'd opened every window on the first floor, but the room still smelled faintly of something organic, like wet leaves left too long under snow. Trying to shake the unease, Isaac turned his attention to the basement. If he was going to restore the property, he'd need to assess everything: plumbing, foundation, wiring, and maybe doing something productive would help clear his head. The door creaked open reluctantly, and he descended with a flashlight, the old wooden stairs groaning under his weight. The basement was even larger than he'd expected, with arched stone walls that suggested the house had deeper roots than the 1,800s structure above. This space was older, much older. He spotted metal shelving units, rusted and bowed, stacked with dusty mason jars and old tools. Cobwebs clung to the ceiling beams like drapes. There was an old meat hook bolted into a ceiling rafter near the back corner. He tried not to stare at it too long. Then he saw the hole, not a crack or damage. This was a perfectly circular opening in the stone floor, about 3 feet wide. It looked like a well, but there was no rope, no cover, just blackness. It hadn't been on the floor plans. He crouched next to it, shining the flashlight down into the shaft. No bottom, just void. He picked up a loose nail from the floor and dropped it in. He never heard it land. A distant noise echoed up instead. It wasn't metallic, it wasn't stone. It was breath, wet and hollow, followed by something like a scraping whisper that may have been words or may have been wind. He backed away slowly. When he returned upstairs, his boots were covered in dirt, and his hands trembled more than he cared to admit. He washed them in the kitchen sink, the rusty water leaving a reddish stain around the porcelain drain. The old pipes gurgled and coughed, like a smoker exhaling their last. Back in the living room, the book had returned to the top of the stack, and it was open again. This time a piece of paper had been wedged between the pages. Parchment, not modern paper, with a frayed red ribbon tied around it like an old letter. He stared at it for a long minute. Then, against his better judgment, he untied the ribbon and opened it. Inside were 6 names, handwritten, in a script that was unmistakably English, but the ink looked centuries old. Isaac Bennett, Marla Cook, Jebediah Black, Colleen March, Lyle Torrance, Kenneth Bright. He didn't recognize any of them, except his own. His heart thudded. Hard. There was no logical explanation for this. He hadn't written this. No one else had been in the house. The locks were still dusty, unbroken, every window sealed, and yet his name, his full name, was there, inked in blood-colored strokes that shimmered faintly in the daylight. He shoved the note back into the book and threw it across the room. It landed spine up. The air seemed to still, like the moment before a storm touches down. Then, very faintly, the walls creaked, not from settling but from pressure, like something exhaling inside them. That night, he couldn't sleep. He locked his bedroom door out of habit, then pushed a dresser in front of it, something he hadn't done since childhood. But the dreams still came. This time, they were clearer. He saw a man in a priest's collar, standing in the middle of the forest. The trees swayed, though there was no wind. The man was screaming in a language Isaac didn't understand, holding a torch in one hand and what looked like a ceremonial dagger in the other. Surrounding him were shadowed figures. Not quite human. They moved like puppets with broken strings. They watched, silent. Then one by one they knelt. The priest drove the blade into his own chest. Isaac jolted awake, drenched in sweat. The dream had felt longer than a night's sleep could hold. He sat up, trying to catch his breath, and that's when he heard it, from downstairs. A rhythmic thump, thump, thump. Like something swinging. He grabbed the flashlight and descended the stairs, barefoot, the wooden steps icy under his skin. In the living room, nothing was out of place, except the book, once again open, now displaying a page that had been blank before. This time, it showed a drawing. A well. A man standing next to it, and beneath the man, something rising from the dark. Something with a face that looked like Isaac's, but contorted, hungry, ancient. He turned, instinct screaming for him to leave. But then came the final sound, one that rooted him in place with the force of a scream locked behind a closed mouth. From the basement, a voice, calling his name. Savek! Some names shouldn't echo through a house that's supposed to be empty, especially not your own. Isaac froze halfway down the stairs. The voice, low, dragging each syllable like it had weight, slithered up from the basement and wrapped around his brain before he could think. He told himself it was a hallucination, maybe a trick of memory, a leftover remnant from his nightmare. But he couldn't unhear it. He stood there in the dark for a full minute, the flashlight trembling in his grip. The beam flickered once, then again. He slapped the side of it out of instinct, but the light dimmed to a dull cone and stayed that way. He took a shaky breath and backed away from the basement door, shutting it slowly. It latched with a tired click, as if even the old house didn't want it open. Upstairs, Isaac collapsed onto the couch, his chest rising and falling like he'd just sprinted through a forest. He tried to laugh, to rationalize what had happened, but the sound came out hoarse, dry. The book lay on the coffee table now, closed neatly, as if nothing had ever happened. But it wasn't nothing. The drawing of the well haunted him. The face that looked like his own, twisted, monstrous, had burned itself into the back of his mind. He opened his laptop, fingers hesitant on the keyboard, and searched for anything about the house. Andal Court Tower plus history yielded nothing. Isaac Bennett plus property record showed only the transaction details of his inheritance. But when he typed Andal Court rituals, an old forum link appeared at the bottom of the page. It led to a thread buried in a paranormal message board. Most posts were broken or deleted, but one remained. If you're reading this and you hear something from the well, do not answer it. It doesn't want your help. It wants your place. There were no replies. The post was dated 6 years ago. Username Lyle T43. Isaac's stomach dropped. Lyle Torrance. One of the names in the book. He sat back, staring at the glow of the laptop screen as if it could offer answers. It didn't. Just more silence. He scrawled, looking for an email or a profile link. Something. But the user was long gone. He needed to know more. The next day, Isaac drove to the town's historical society. The building sat at the corner of a sleepy main street, tucked between a closed-down bakery and an antique store that smelled like vinegar and dust. Inside, an older woman with a ponytail and wire-rimmed glasses greeted him. "You new in town?" she asked, eyeing him over the rim of her tea. "Sort of. I just inherited the Andal property. Thought I'd learn a little about it." Her eyes didn't widen, but her fingers tightened slightly around the cup. "You're living there?" He nodded slowly. "I am, for now." She stood and gestured toward the back. "Follow me." She led him through rows of archives and pulled out a brown file from a drawer labeled AD. "You won't find much online. Most of this was never digitized." The folder contained old newspaper clippings, all yellowed and curling at the edges. Most were mundane, land disputes, agricultural permits. But near the back was a photograph. A black and white image of 6 people standing in front of the house. Isaac recognized none of them, but beneath the photo, handwritten in ink, were names. Marla Cook, Jebediah Black, Colleen March, Kenneth Bright, Lyle Torrance, Isaac Bennett. He blinked. The date stamped on the back, October 1891. "That's impossible," he whispered. The woman raised an eyebrow. "What is?" "This man," Isaac said, pointing at the figure labeled Isaac Bennett. He leaned in. "That's my name. And he looks like me." She glanced at the photo, then back at him, her expression unreadable. "Some families repeat names," she said carefully. "But that resemblance, well, it's not the first time someone said that." He stared at the image, the chill returning to his bones. What happened to them? Her fingers drummed against the wooden table. They called themselves the Keepers of the Mouth. Said they were protecting something buried under the house, some sort of local folklore. Then one day, they all vanished. "All 6? She nodded. "Gone. No bodies, no notes, just gone." That night, the book was no longer on the table. It sat on his bed instead. Isaac stood in the doorway to his room, not moving, staring at the object like it might breathe. The red ribbon lay on the floor beside it, curled like it had slithered off. He didn't remember bringing it upstairs. He didn't remember touching it. This time, he opened it slowly. The pages were darker now, almost black, and each turn felt heavier than paper should. Near the back, he found something new, a symbol etched into the page, not drawn but cut, like it had been carved into the material itself. A circle, a well, 6 points around it like a clock. His name glowed faintly at the 12 o'clock mark. The others, Marla, Jebediah, Lyle, Colleen, Kenneth, occupied the remaining points. But something had changed. One name was now smudged out, the ink smeared like someone had tried to erase it with blood. Kenneth Bright. Beneath it, in tight cursive, a line had appeared. "When the 6th is chosen, the gate will open." He slammed the book shut and backed out of the room. Downstairs, the basement door was open. He hadn't touched it. He knew he hadn't touched it. From within, a faint sound echoed up the stairs. A dragging wet noise like something crawling across stone. Isaac didn't move, not because he didn't want to, but because he couldn't. His legs refused, as if they understood what his mind would not accept. Then came the whisper again, but this time it didn't call his name. This time it said a number. 5. The whisper echoed for a moment too long. 5. then silence again. Isaac stood frozen at the bottom of the stairs, hands clenched so tightly he could feel the crescent moons of his nails against his palms. The air in the hallway had shifted, thicker, heavier, like walking through water. Something was awake in the basement. He closed the basement door with trembling fingers, sliding the bolt across for the first time since moving in. A weak gesture. If whatever was down there wanted to come up, a flimsy piece of metal wouldn't stop it. He barely slept. The house breathed around him, not creaked. Breathed. That's how it felt. Walls inhaling and exhaling, pipes sighing not from pressure, but from presence. And every so often, in the distance, the muffled sound of pages turning. Somewhere upstairs. At dawn, he fled to the town library. He didn't say hello to the staff, didn't ask for help. He dove straight into the archives. Physical ones this time, dust-laced folders stacked in beige cabinets. He searched for anything about the original six. Marla, Jebediah, Lyle, Colleen, Kenneth, and the other Isaac. He wasn't even sure what he was hoping to find. Proof? Closure? A way out? What he found was a map. A hand-drawn diagram folded behind an old township ledger. The land that was now Andelcourt Tower used to belong to something called the Circle of Dominion, a spiritualist sect from the 19th century. The map was covered in notations. Blood point, mouthstone, gatewell, and a scribbled phrase in red ink. Only the sixth can close what the first opened. The sixth. Him? A noise snapped his focus. A librarian, young, freckled, apologetic, stood near the table. She held a thin black book. "This was left at the front desk with your name," she said. "No return label." He frowned, took it slowly. The cover was blank. The first page had a single sentence. "You are the last." He didn't go home, not yet. Instead, he drove, out of town, to a place he'd seen only once before, on the back of the old forum thread from Lyle Torrance. A photo of a broken-down church in the woods with no real name, just coordinates. It had taken an hour to trace them, another 2 to reach the trailhead. He parked, walked. The air grew colder with each step into the forest. Not winter cold, wrong cold. Ancient, bone-deep cold that didn't belong in June. And then he saw it. The church sat like a carcass, hollow and sunken. The steeple snapped in half, as if crushed by unseen hands. Moss dripped from the walls. Ivy strangled every window. The door, miraculously, still hung on one hinge. Inside, symbols. The same circle he saw in the book. 6 points. The well. But here on the rotting floorboards, the names had been carved directly into the wood. 5 were already marked. His was not. A 6th space. Blank. In the center of the circle was a small hole, maybe 3 feet wide, bricked around like a well. A rope ladder dangled into it. No sound came from below, but the air smelled like copper and mildew. He hesitated. A whisper floated up. Not a word, but a hum. Familiar, luring, comforting. His mother's voice. But it couldn't be. She'd been dead for 8 years. "Isaac." He staggered back, heartbeat wild. The forest outside had gone utterly silent. No birds, no wind, just the creak of the rotted beams and the throb in his ears. He ran. Didn't stop until he reached his car, the whole world pressing in on him like it wanted him gone. He got back to the house at nightfall. The basement door was open. The bolt was still in place, untouched, but the door stood open, wide, welcoming. His phone buzzed. An unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but instinct overruled fear. "Hello?" A man's voice crackled through, ancient and cracked like dry leaves. "Stop looking. You've been chosen. That is the only truth that matters now." Isaac backed away, nearly dropping the phone. "Who is this?" A pause, a low exhale. "You're late, Isaac," The others waited longer than they should have. We bled for this. Don't waste it. The line went dead. He didn't sleep that night either. Instead, he reread every page of the book. This time, there were new entries, journal-like passages in varying handwriting styles. They told fragmented stories of guilt, sacrifice, rituals performed at the stroke of midnight on equinoxes. One line repeated over and over, "To seal the gate, the sixth must descend." At exactly 3:33 IEM, the doorbell rang. He waited. Another ring. Isaac crept to the door, peering through the peephole. No one. He opened the door an inch, looked down. A small package sat on the porch, wrapped in red velvet. He unwrapped it with shaking hands. Inside, a single rusted key and a slip of paper. "The well opens tomorrow night. If you don't go willingly, it will come for you." He dropped the package and staggered back inside. The book sat waiting on the couch again, open to the final page. His name had now joined the others, 6, complete. And beneath it, written in fresh ink that bled through the page, "Midnight. Beneath the house, the gate must feed." Isaac dropped the book as if it burned him, but it was already too late. From beneath the floorboards, something knocked. Once, twice, then a third time. Soft, slow, deliberate. And from the basement, rising steadily, came the unmistakable sound of footsteps, wet, dragging, coming up the stairs. Some footsteps echo only after you've already heard them once. Isaac pressed his back to the wall, the cold from the plaster bleeding through his shirt, chest heaving in silence. The footsteps had stopped, but not in relief, more like a predator pausing just out of sight. He dared a glance toward the basement door, still open. Darkness loomed beyond the frame, thick as oil, but nothing stirred now. The knock, the dragging steps. They had receded, or waited. He didn't dare check which. When the sun finally crept over the horizon, slicing pale gold through the curtains, he forced himself to move. His legs tingled, numb from hours of stillness. He shuffled to the door and shut it, not even locking it this time. There was no illusion of security left. Andal Court Tower was breathing. By noon, Isaac found himself back at the church ruins, not for answers, but because staying in the house had become unbearable. It felt like sitting inside the mouth of something too patient to bite. Yet, the forest around the church was alive in a way the town wasn't. Crows tracked his movements with uncanny silence. The wind whispered in tongues he didn't know, but almost understood. The path to the ruins seemed shorter now, like the trees bent inward to guide him. Inside, the light through the shattered windows cut across the floor like prison bars. Dust danced in the beams. The circle was still there. The names too, his own, now fully inscribed. But something was different. The well in the center had been uncovered further, dirt around the edges disturbed, bricks chipped. It had grown. He peered into the hole. Where before it had ended in shadows, now he could see faintly deeper. A stair spiraling downward, carved in stone slick with moisture. Something ancient had been waiting beneath the church, and now it was preparing. The urge to descend pulsed in his chest like a second heartbeat. Not curiosity, not fear. Obligation. He tore himself away. As he stepped into the clearing beyond the church, he found someone waiting for him. A woman, early 30s maybe, sharp-boned face, auburn hair tied into a knot, wearing a threadbare flannel and boots caked in old mud. Her arms were crossed, expression unreadable. "You're late," she said. Isaac blinked. What? "You were supposed to be here 3 days ago." He stared. "Do I know you?" "No, but I know you. Everyone does. You're the 6th. The chill that passed through him was almost a relief. "And you are?" She glanced over her shoulder, as if afraid of being overheard by the forest itself. "Call me May. I'm what's left of the 5th. Isaac's stomach turned. "Lyle?" May gave a humorless smile. "Lyle was my brother." A pause. "I watched him change." They stood in silence for a long moment before May motioned toward a fallen tree. They sat, facing the ruins. She pulled a small pendant from under her shirt, a crude circle made of twisted twigs. I tried to run. I left Andal Court when I was 17, didn't come back for a decade. Then one day, I started waking up at 3:33, no alarms, no noise, just the pull. Then the voices came, whispers, warnings. She glanced at him. And the key? He nodded. Last night, in a note, said if I don't go willingly, it'll come. May's eyes darkened. It will, and it won't knock next time. He swallowed. What is it? May looked back toward the ruined church. You think it's a demon, a god, a curse. It's none of those, or maybe all of them, the circle of dominion. They didn't worship it. They fed it. They found something buried below that well, something old, something hungry. They made a deal. Isaac felt cold spread through his ribs. What kind of deal? Protection, power, in exchange for continuity. Every generation, 6 must be marked, 1 to open, 5 to maintain, 1 to seal again. His breath caught. So, I'm the sealer, the gatekeeper, or the key depending on how you look at it. She stood suddenly, brushing off her jeans. And you're out of time. He followed her gaze. From the church, a faint rumble like stone grinding on stone. The well was opening. Midnight tonight, she said. You go down there, or it comes up here, and it doesn't care who gets hurt on the way. Isaac felt the weight of her stare. I'll be there, she said softly, but only once. If you hesitate, I won't pull you out. Then she was gone, vanished into the woods with the silence of someone who'd lived with ghosts for too long. Isaac stayed behind a few minutes longer, eyes fixed on the church, where a new sound now echoed faintly from the well. Chanting. Words not in any language he recognized, but his body reacted anyway. Knees weak, stomach coiling, ears ringing. Like the sound alone could unmake him. That night he returned home for the last time. The lights in the house flickered, though there was no storm. The book waited on the kitchen counter, open to a new page. Tonight the veil thins. The 6th must choose. Descend or dissolve. He closed the book and packed a backpack. Water, flashlight, the key, the note, just in case. At 11:42 p.m., he stood outside the ruined church again. May waited at the entrance. Neither of them spoke. He stepped toward the well, and the air grew wrong, too loud in some places, utterly dead in others. The forest behind them faded into mist. The stars overhead dimmed, as if turning away. Isaac grasped the rope ladder. One last look at May. She nodded once. Then he climbed down into the dark. One step at a time, the walls wet and pulsing, the chanting growing louder. And as his foot touched the first stone of the spiral stair, the ladder snapped loose behind him. The air inside the well pressed in like a second skin, damp, warm, and moving. Isaac steadied himself on the slick stone wall as the last echo of the ladder's collapse faded into silence above. He was alone now, completely, profoundly alone, but not untouched. The chanting continued. It didn't echo like it should have in a stone shaft. It felt closer, too close, like the voices were being whispered directly into the folds of his brain. No distinct words, no identifiable language, just rhythm, cadence, meaning delivered through feeling rather than syllables. He stepped forward. The spiral stair clung to the wall of the shaft, each step slick with moss and something else, something red and thin that streaked like veins. The deeper he went, the warmer it became. Not just temperature, but a kind of emotional heat. Rage, desperation, hunger. As if the very walls were seething with memories that refused to die. After what felt like hours, he reached the bottom. The final step opened into a chamber that pulsed with dim orange light. A cavernous space, impossibly large, with walls of glistening black stone that twisted and shifted subtly, as if trying to remember their own shape. In the center of the chamber stood a monolith, 10 feet tall, smooth, carved with symbols that hurt to look at. shapes that made no sense and yet suggested intent. Around it were 6 stone pedestals arranged in a circle. 5 were occupied. He staggered closer. Each pedestal held a figure. Their bodies were twisted, gaunt, unmoving, skin gray and translucent, as if their souls had been vacuumed out, leaving only vessels. One had no jaw. Another's eyes wept smoke. One seemed to twitch rhythmically in place, though it made no sound. All faced inward toward the monolith. The 6th pedestal was empty. Behind it, an archway. No door, just a passage deeper still. Isaac stepped forward, breath shallow. He didn't want to look at them, but he had to. As he passed the nearest, he recognized the face, what remained of it. Cracked glasses, scarf still knotted tightly to a neck far too thin. Father Halbrook. Isaac froze. "Impossible," he whispered. The priest had disappeared when Isaac was still a child. The rumors were vague. Some said suicide, others claimed he fled town. But now, the 5th, Lyle, May's brother. His pedestal bore a carving in fresh stone, the name Lyle Anders written in the same script as Isaac's key. The closer he came to the monolith, the more it seemed to vibrate, respond to him. It was aware, and it was waiting. Isaac felt the key in his pocket pulse with heat. He drew it out. Its surface was smooth now, the engraved name gone. But when he held it toward the monolith, a narrow slot revealed itself in the stone, a vertical seam that opened with a sound like bone cracking under pressure. He hesitated, but his hands moved without his consent. The key slid in. A grinding sound echoed through the chamber. The chanting stopped. The figures on the pedestals turned their heads in unison. A sickening creak of bones and tendons, long since unused. Then came a voice, not from any mouth, not even from within the room. It came from beneath. "You have accepted." Isaac tried to back away, but couldn't move. The monolith split down the center, revealing not a passage, but a pool, black and thick, swirling with phosphorescent tendrils. From its center, something began to rise. At first, he thought it was a person, tall, robed, arms outstretched. But then he saw its face, or rather, its absence. A void where a face should be, framed by rows of teeth spiraling inward. No eyes, no features, just hunger given form. It stepped onto the chamber floor, and the stone beneath it breathed, sighing with each movement. Isaac screamed, but no sound came out. "6 must bind," the voice said again, from everywhere and nowhere. 5 sustain, 1 chooses. The entity pointed to the 6th pedestal. Isaac shook his head violently, tears streaking his cheeks. "I didn't agree to this." "You descended." His knees gave out. The figures began to chant again. This time their mouths moved. Some twisted open far beyond human limits. Others split along the throat, and still others oozed words through the pores of their skin. The entity extended its hand. "Take your place." Isaac scrambled backward, but the chamber had shifted. The walls now curved inward, spiraling like a conch, drawing him toward the pedestal. He heard footsteps. Someone else descending. He looked up. May. Her face was hard, but her eyes betrayed fear. "You shouldn't have done it," she said quietly. "But maybe you still have a choice." The entity turned toward her. "She bears the mark of the 5th. She may not interfere." May pulled something from her coat, a jagged shard of mirror. She stepped between Isaac and the entity. "I broke the pattern once. I'll break it again." The entity paused, then laughed. It wasn't a sound, it was an infection of noise, laughter that crawled into Isaac's ears and scratched behind his eyes. The chamber cracked. Blood poured from the seams in the floor. The monolith shuddered, and then Isaac heard it. A heartbeat. Not his, not May's. It came from within the pool, getting louder, faster. The monolith closed again, trapping whatever remained of the darkness within. The figures froze. May grabbed his arm. "Run," she hissed. "Now!" The stair behind them had vanished. In its place, a new passage, carved not from stone, but from bone and sinew. They ran. The hallway pulsed around them. Screams echoed from the walls. Fingers twitched in the ceiling. Eyes opened in the floor. But they ran anyway until they reached a gate of iron. Beyond it, another chamber, circular, dimly lit by a ring of candles. At the center, a throne carved from skulls, and on it sat someone waiting, someone familiar, someone who looked exactly like Isaac. No mirror ever told Isaac the truth, but this thing sitting on the throne looked back with a gaze that knew every corner of him. He froze. May, breathless beside him, muttered something under her breath. An old prayer, maybe, or a curse. Her eyes darted from the figure on the throne to Isaac and back again. She saw it too. The resemblance wasn't vague or symbolic. It was literal. Bone for bone, scar for scar, the curve of the jaw, the small break on the left incisor, the uneven ears. It was him, but wrong. The double sat perfectly still, hands folded atop a long, thin staff carved of something glistening in white. The throne it occupied pulsed faintly, as though it drew breath. The eyes of the skulls embedded in its arms and back flickered with a dull red light. The room, circular and ancient, was silent, save for the low hum of unseen forces at work. Blood whispering beneath the stone, the creak of centuries-old bones shifting against one another. Isaac started, but the word felt foreign in his throat. The double raised a hand, not to silence, to welcome. It smiled. May stepped forward instinctively, blocking Isaac. "What the hell is that?" she asked. The double tilted its head, still smiling. Then, in a voice that matched Isaac's perfectly, but emptier, colder, older, it said, "He is me. I am he. I am what comes after." Isaac's knees went weak. That's not possible. The figure stood, staff tapping once against the stone. "You opened the well. You turned the key. You gave consent, even if you didn't know the question." May shook her head, one hand fumbling for the mirror shard she still carried. "You're not taking him." "I already have," the double said. "I've always had him." It turned its back on them, walking slowly toward the far end of the chamber. There, a massive wall was etched with ancient symbols, many of them identical to the ones on Isaac's key, and others that pulsed with living light as the double approached. The wall opened. Inside, darkness that breathed. Isaac stepped closer despite May's protest. "What is this place?" His double looked back. "A mirror, a cradle, a tomb." He pointed at the flickering wall. "There is something buried below. Something that feeds on versions, echoes. It is why the rituals began, why the six must bind. You are not the first, Isaac Anders. You are the sixth." May went pale. "No, that's not true. I kept track. Lyle was fifth. He didn't make it." The double grinned wider. "Exactly. So another had to be chosen. Another had to answer the call." May turned to Isaac, lips trembling. "You weren't supposed to be here. This wasn't supposed to happen again." "What do you mean?" Isaac asked. "Again?" May's voice broke. "My brother went into the well 10 years ago. We thought he died, but something crawled back out months later. Changed. It wore his face for a while, then it vanished. I spent years tracking the signs, the rituals, the cycles. I broke the sixth link. I ended it. I swear to you, I ended it." The double laughed, a deep, hollow sound like wind moving through catacombs. "You delayed it. That is not the same." May threw the shard of mirror to the floor. It shattered with a sharp crack that seemed to shake the walls. "Then I'll do it again." The double turned fully toward her. "You don't understand. He is not the sacrifice. He is the mirror, and it's already been broken." The walls groaned. The chamber flickered, and Isaac felt it. Something was inside him. Something not alive, not dead, but deeply aware. It shifted beneath his ribs, behind his eyes. Not a possession, not an invasion, a return. He dropped to his knees. May screamed his name. Visions flooded his head. He saw himself in other places, dressed differently, speaking words he didn't know, making choices he'd never made. He saw 5 other lives spiral into ruin. A boy drowned in a baptismal font, a teen swallowed by flame, a man who slit his own throat in a library. All versions of him, all failures, except this one. This version had made it to the throne room, the 6th. He looked up at his double. "What do you want from me?" The figure approached, slow and deliberate. "To accept, to continue, to forget who you were and become what we need." Isaac backed away. "No." The double raised a hand and pointed behind him. There, the shadows parted. A new door had opened, not of stone, not bone, wood, simple, weathered, marked with 3 deep gashes. Through it came a sound Isaac hadn't heard in years, his mother's voice, calling his name, gentle and warm. "Isaac, sweetheart, come home, please." He turned to May, who stood frozen, mouth open. "Do you hear that?" May didn't answer. He took a step toward the door. The double didn't stop him. "You may choose the dream," it said softly, "but you'll wake up here again." The door pulsed with light, and from within he heard another voice, his father's this time, laughing. Isaac reached for the handle. Behind him, the double smiled. "Every version does." And then he opened it. The door closed behind him with the finality of a coffin lid. For a moment, there was only darkness. Then came the warmth. Isaac blinked. Sunlight poured through the kitchen window, dappling the faded linoleum with gold. The smell of burnt toast and cheap coffee lingered in the air. The old clock ticked above the stove, its hands pointing to 7:13 a.m., just like always. He stood barefoot, wearing the threadbare flannel he hadn't seen in years. "Morning, baby," a voice said behind him. He turned. His mother stood at the counter, humming to herself, a spatula in one hand. Her face was exactly as he remembered, tired but kind, hair tied up in a frizzy bun, lips stained with too much red. She smiled like the world wasn't broken, like he wasn't broken. Isaac didn't move, didn't breathe. This wasn't possible. She'd died 5 years ago. Cancer. Alone. But here she was. "I made you eggs," she said, sliding a plate onto the table. "Hope you're not late again. Mr. Bradley won't like that." Isaac's knees almost gave out. He gripped the back of a chair. Where am I?" His mother chuckled. "Still dreaming, huh? You always talk weird when you wake up slow." He looked down at his hands. They were his, but younger. No scar across the palm, no tremble in the knuckles. His throat tightened. "This isn't real." She raised an eyebrow. "What's not real, honey?" He backed away, knocking over the chair. "I saw you die. I buried you. I said goodbye." Her smile faltered. "Isaac, sweetheart, why would you say something like that? I'm right here." Then came footsteps. His father stepped in from the hallway wearing the old Michigan State hoodie, yawning, scratching his chest. "Morning, champ." Isaac stared at him. The man who had died of an overdose behind a gas station dumpster was standing in front of him like it was 2008, and he didn't look a day older. "You okay, son?" his father asked, concern creasing his brow. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Isaac didn't answer. He ran. The house shifted as he did, corridors stretching, walls bending, doors multiplying like mirrors in a fun house. No matter which one he opened, he ended up back in the kitchen, back at the table, back where his parents smiled and served breakfast and asked if he was feeling all right. A loop. No escape. And worse, each time he returned, they seemed closer, more invasive, more knowing. The 10th time, his mother placed her hand on his shoulder and whispered, "It's safer here, Isaac. You don't need to remember." The 15th time, his father leaned in and said, "Out there, you're already dead. This is mercy." On the 20th, he screamed. The world cracked, like glass under pressure. The room distorted, and something moved beneath their faces. Just for a second, a shimmer, like oil on water, their smiles too wide, their eyes too still. He saw the thing inside the memory. It had worn them like skin. The illusion fractured. He was in the hallway again, but now it was raw, unfinished, the beams exposed and weeping sap. The photos on the wall were wrong, each frame showing different versions of him, some smiling, some bleeding, one without a face at all. He turned a corner. At the end of the hall stood a mirror, but not just any mirror, the mirror. The one from the well. It pulsed with the same energy he'd felt when his double spoke. Ancient, deep, patient. May stood in the reflection, but she wasn't moving. She was frozen, mid-scream, eyes wide with terror, mouth open in a silent plea. Behind her, shadows twisted, long clawed hands reaching toward her shoulders. One almost touched her neck. Isaac slammed his fists against the glass. "May! May!" Nothing. He looked around. The hallway was empty. No doors, no exits, just the mirror. And then his double's voice, echoing from nowhere and everywhere. "She's outside now, in the waking place. You left her." Isaac turned, shouting, "Bring me back now!" The voice purred. "You chose the dream. The real has moved on without you." Isaac clenched his fists. "This is a lie. Everything is a lie," the voice replied. "Even you." The mirror cracked. A line split May's face. The glass fractured, slowly at first, then all at once. The hallway collapsed into shadow. Isaac screamed and opened his eyes in a hospital bed. White sheets, monitors beeping softly. A nurse looking startled as he gasped awake. "Mr. Anders?" she asked. "Easy now, you've been in a coma for 3 months." He blinked. "No," he said. "That's not right." She pressed a button on the wall. Footsteps came running, doctors, a woman crying outside the door. "Your girlfriend's been here every day," the nurse said gently. "May, she's just outside." He tried to sit up. "No, she's in the mirror. She's not real." The door opened. May stepped in, eyes red, pale, real. She ran to his side. "Isaac, oh my God!" He stared at her. She felt solid. Her hands warm, but he couldn't trust it. Not anymore. Not after what he'd seen. "Where am I?" he whispered. May looked at the nurse, then back at him. "You're safe." But outside the window, the sky was wrong. Too dark, too still. No sun, no clouds. Only a vast stretch of mirror, and something watching from behind it, watching him wake up. The first time Isaac tried to leave the hospital, the world folded in on itself. It began with the hallway. One moment, he was pushing open the door to his room, its chipped white paint, the sharp scent of antiseptic, the IV line still taped clumsily to his arm. And the next, he was stepping into a corridor that extended impossibly far, like some endless airport terminal caught in permanent dusk. He stopped. Behind him, the door had vanished. Ahead, flickering fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like dying flies. Wheelchairs lined the walls, some rusted, others with cracked leather and strange stains on the cushions. A single gurney sat abandoned under a fire exit sign, but the arrow pointed down into a pit of shadow where the floor simply ended. A figure moved. At the far end, past a bend in the corridor, a silhouette wheeled an IV stand and disappeared into the gloom. Isaac walked faster. The rhythm of his bare feet on the vinyl floor echoed too loud, too close. He rounded the corner and froze. The hallway ahead had changed again. No longer a hospital, not exactly. The walls were tiled now, bathroom tiles, smeared with dirt and something darker. The overhead lights hummed, blinking in a slow rhythm like a heartbeat. There were doors on either side, Identical, unmarked, slightly ajar. He stepped forward. Each door he passed whispered, not in words, in memories. One breathed the scent of wet leaves and crushed paper, his childhood attic. Another leaked the cold iron tang of blood, just like the alley where he'd once found a dead bird as a boy. The next exhaled static and the sharp chemical burn of VHS tapes long since forgotten. All fragments of lives he barely remembered. All his. All wrong. Isaac paused at one door, its handle pulse warm under his fingers. He pushed. The room inside was empty save for a single object. A mirror, a frame, just glass hanging in midair. His reflection stared back, only it wasn't him. Not exactly. The reflection looked tired, hollow-eyed, pale, lips chapped, jaw tight. But behind it stood another figure. Faint, translucent, flickering in and out of view like a smudge on the edge of thought. He turned. Nothing there. He looked back. The figure was closer. A woman. Long dark hair, face obscured in blur, insect-like limbs shifting behind her like antennae made of smoke. Isaac backed out and slammed the door shut. The hallway blinked and reset. He was now in what looked like an abandoned school. Lockers lined both walls, each hung open, filled with things that didn't belong. Bones, VHS cassettes, antique clocks ticking at random intervals. The overhead PA system hissed. Then a voice crackled through. Not a voice, his voice, reading something, a journal entry. They told me it would be safe, that the dreams would stop, that May would never know. But she always knew. She always saw it first. The cracks, the other doors. Isaac turned in circles, trying to find the source. But the voice came from everywhere. I died once already, it whispered. You don't have to again, just lie still, let the dreams settle. A locker slammed open beside him. Inside, his face. Not reflected. Placed. As if severed. Eyes open, mouth stitched shut. He ran. No direction, just away. But the halls shifted, like intestine. Looping. Unforgiving. Then, footsteps behind him. Fast. Unsteady. Not human. He ducked into a supply closet, heart racing. Hand clamped over his mouth. The thing passed by, not quite walking, more like dragging itself forward, its legs crooked, arms twitching at angles no joint should bend. It was wearing his hospital gown. Its face was stitched with dozens of tiny black crosses. It sniffed, paused, turned. He didn't breathe. After a beat, it moved on. When he dared step out, the hallway was gone again. Now it was a street. Night. Rain falling upward in slow motion, droplets ascending into the clouds. Streetlights hummed. Car alarms wailed in silence. All the buildings were identical copies of the house he grew up in. And then he saw them, other people, dozens of them, moving in quiet confusion, dressed in hospital gowns, pajamas, suits. Any number of eras, styles. Some walked in circles, others spoke to things that weren't there. One man stood on the hood of a car and laughed so hard he vomited shadow. Isaac approached a woman in a gray coat. She turned, startled. Her face was blank, smooth. No eyes, no mouth, just skin. She raised a hand and pointed at him. No eyes, but she said. And then she screamed without sound and crumpled into dust. The streetlights went out. A voice whispered in his ear, "You're not supposed to be here yet." He turned. A man stood behind him, smoking a bent cigarette, one eye missing, a name tag around his neck that read, Patient, 13 Eric Malo. "You're one of them," Eric said. Isaac backed away. One of who? The dreamers. The ones who slipped through too fast. It's rare. Most people settle, accept the coma, let it run its course. You've been skipping scenes, breaking loops. They don't like that. Isaac frowned. They? Eric gestured up. The sky flickered, like a TV screen losing signal. They watch from behind the glass, he said. Call them whatever you want. Archons, wardens, gods, they built this place from your heads. You wander too far from the script, and they send in cleaners. Rebooters. Isaac's skin crawled. What are you? Someone who woke up halfway and never got out. I remember who I was. What they showed me. What they took. Eric's voice cracked. There's more of us. Hidden. Under the floorboards. Between chapters. They can't erase everything. Can you help me find May? Eric studied him. You still think she's real? Isaac stepped closer. I saw her. I talked to her. Eric's expression twisted. Then you're in more danger than I thought. A horn blared in the distance. Eric flinched. They found us. From down the street, figures emerged. Not people. Silhouettes with mirrored faces, each one reflecting Isaac's own expression. Blank, disoriented, hollow. They moved in sync. No footsteps. Just gliding. Eric pulled something from his coat, an old cassette recorder. Here, he said, if you survive, find the place with no windows. Say this. Remember, not all reflections are memories. Some are mouths. He shoved Isaac into a doorway. It closed behind him, and he was falling, through layers of static, through memories not his, until he landed, hard, in a subway tunnel filled with smoke. The walls pulsed, and from the darkness, a voice spoke. Welcome back, Isaac. It was May, but not his May. The voice was deeper, hungrier. The tunnel stretched impossibly long, disappearing into thick gray mist that shimmered like smoke underwater. Isaac stood motionless, the echo of May's voice, warped and unmistakably wrong, still vibrating through his spine. May, he called out, his voice brittle. A pause, then footsteps, slow, deliberate, echoed from the darkness. Not one pair, multiple. Clicking heels, bare soles, something dragging, then silence. From the haze ahead, a shape emerged. Not May, but wearing her face. The woman, if she could be called that, stepped into view wearing the same pale hospital gown he remembered. Her hair hung wet across her cheeks, and her eyes glowed faintly red, pupils wide and too smooth, like mirrors with blood behind them. Isaac's breath caught. May, he whispered. She smiled, but it was crooked, the expression tearing slightly at the corners of her lips, too wide, too stiff. I missed you, Isaac, she said. The voice matched, but its cadence was off, as if someone were playing an audio recording at the wrong speed. He took a step back. Where are we? He asked. What is this place? May, or the thing wearing May, tilted her head. You already know. You've always known. You came here before. This isn't the first version of you I've met. What? She stepped closer. With each movement, her body twitched, like a stop-magnet animation skipping frames. Her feet didn't touch the ground anymore. You're not the original Isaac, she whispered, now inches from his face. He died 2 chapters ago. He shook his head. No, that's not true. 1,000 voices whispered yes from the smoke behind her. Isaac turned, but the tunnel had disappeared. The concrete walls gave way to shifting panels, blinking red glyphs and fleshy veins threading through stone. He was inside something alive now. A womb, a memory, a trap. May reached out. He flinched. She touched his chest, right over his heart. You don't remember the ritual, do you? She murmured. The sacrifice. I didn't. You chose me, she interrupted. You let them take me. No, Isaac said through clenched teeth. I tried to stop them. You watched, she said. Her voice trembled now, as if the rage was slipping through the mask. You watched them open me up. You let the mirror split me into 7 versions, and then you walked away. I never. She slapped him, but not physically. The tunnel reeled as if time itself had flinched, and suddenly, Isaac was no longer standing. He was back in a room, a white, sterile chamber with glass walls. Inside, strapped to a gurney, a younger version of himself screamed silently while shadows and surgical masks hovered over May's twitching body. An overhead screen blinked symbols. Dream Layer 6. Ritual unstable. Subject splitting. He banged on the glass. No, stop it. But no one turned. No one ever did. The glass pulsed, and he was back in the tunnel. May stood in front of him, but now her face was cracked. Literal fractures spidering out from her mouth and eyes, like a porcelain doll held together by invisible tension. "You left me there," she hissed. Isaac stepped back. "None of this is real," he muttered. "This is a loop, a trick. You're not her." "I'm what's left of her," she said. "The piece they couldn't digest. The shard stuck in their throat, and now I'm inside you." She placed both hands on his head, and everything flashed white. Now he was floating, above a burning forest, a symbol drawn in ash beneath him. Two mirrors facing each other and a third suspended between, cracking. Below, children danced, in robes made of hospital gowns. They chanted in tongues. Someone wept, someone screamed, someone bled. And in the center, a throne, a black metal chair built from IV poles, scalpels, and broken screens. On it sat a corpse. Him, his body, burned, stitched, still twitching. He screamed. May's voice flooded his skull. It was never a coma. It was the upload. The dream was a bridge. You are the file. He fell. Back through layers of rooms, corridors, tunnels, each one flickering like skipped footage. Scenes of his life, warped and rearranged. A birthday party where everyone had no face. A hospital room where the doctors chanted in reverse. A mirror that showed him as a child, an old man, and a shadow all at once. He landed hard on cold tiles, breathless, alone. Except someone stood over him. Not May, not the mirrored figures. A man in a suit, perfectly tailored, eyes empty. The administrator. Isaac tried to move, couldn't. The man knelt, pulled out a key from his pocket. Cold, old, blackened. "We've been watching," the administrator said. "You're skipping layers, breaking chains. That makes you dangerous. That makes you useful." Isaac coughed. "Why? Me?" "Because you remember pain." The man smiled. "And pain is the password." He pressed the key into Isaac's chest. No blood, just light. A door opened behind him, a real one, a simple wooden frame hanging in midair. The administrator whispered, "The archive awaits." Isaac stumbled to his feet. "What if I don't go?" The administrator shrugged. "Then the dream resets. You go back to page 1. We send in a cleaner to try again. But if you go through," he paused, "you might find her. Or lose everything. Either way, the story continued." Isaac stepped forward. The door pulsed. Inside, darkness. A whisper of May's laughter. And something else. A second voice. Deeper. Hungry. Calling his name. He stepped through. The door slammed shut. The hallway behind him blinked and vanished. There was no floor. Isaac wasn't falling. But he wasn't standing either. He existed in the space between breath and thought, between a blink and the shadow that lingers afterward. The archive didn't begin with walls or ceilings. It began with absence. And then it noticed him. Light did not return gently. It injected itself into his eyes, harsh, artificial, like halogen in a sterile hospital corridor. A single bulb flickered above. He stood alone in a narrow hall lined with doors, thousands of them, stretching endlessly in both directions. Each door bore a nameplate, some etched, some blood-written, some charred. Some of the names were his. Isaac Reed, version 3A. Isaac Reed, ritual fail, memory leak detected. Isaac R, mirror 7 contaminated. He backed away. But behind him, no door, no return. The archive was alive, and it had cataloged every version of him that had ever existed. "Welcome back," said a voice. Not a whisper, not a scream. It was like hearing your own voice on a recording, except it was speaking thoughts you hadn't yet thought. You passed the threshold that makes you readable, sortable. A figure emerged from the far end of the corridor, tall, robed in surgical linen, face composed entirely of rotating mechanical dials. No mouth, no eyes, just a constant ticking. The curator. Isaac's mind flinched at the recognition. This being had shown up in his dreams before, always standing over his crib, always closing a file. "What is this place?" Isaac asked. "Your data," the curator replied. "Your memories, your guilt, indexed and decontextualized for ritual access. This is where meaning dies and structure reigns." Isaac's mouth went dry. "And May?" The curator cocked its head. "She's been archived, fragmented, but still queryable." "Show me," he whispered. Without turning, the curator pointed down the hall. A single door opened at the far end. Black mist poured from its frame, humming like a warning tone from deep underwater. Isaac hesitated. The curator spoke again. "Be advised, opening the memory may result in corruption of your core schema. You may forget who you are. You may remember who you were. Sometimes that is worse." He stepped forward anyway. Each footstep echoed with the weight of a decision he couldn't reverse. The door's label read, May L. Reed. Ritual, no. 213. Status, unresolved. He opened it. Immediately he was pulled inside, not just in body, but in code. His skin sizzled, his bones cracked into string, his memories unraveled and flared into flame. And then he stood in a perfect replica of their living room. The sun shone through the windows, coffee steamed on the table. May sat on the couch, smiling softly, alive, whole, but still. She didn't blink, didn't breathe. Isaac stepped toward her. "May." Her head turned, too slowly, and her eyes locked onto his, but they were glass, frozen mid-reflection. "Do you remember the lake?" she said suddenly. He froze. Yeah. Summer 2015. We drove 4 hours to, not that lake," she cut in. "The one beneath the hospital." He blinked. "What are you talking about?" She smiled again, and it cracked her cheek like dried porcelain. "Where they built the servers, where they stored our dreams, where they uploaded us after we died." "This isn't real." "Exactly. That's why it matters." May stood and the room began to melt. Walls drooping like wax, windows bleeding black liquid, furniture distorting into bone shapes. "Wait, no." But she was walking away now, toward a door that hadn't been there a moment ago. It shimmered like oil on water. "Follow me," she said, "if you still want the truth." Isaac followed, and suddenly they were no longer in the house. They were in a chamber made of mirrors, an infinite array stretching in all directions. Each mirror showed a version of May, smiling, screaming, burning, dissolving. One sobbed quietly. One had no eyes. One was suspended in surgical restraints. In one mirror, Isaac saw himself cutting open her chest with a scalpel. He looked away. "You had to choose," May said quietly. "Them or me." "You always chose them." "I didn't know." "You did. Every version of you did. That's why you keep getting She turned, walked to a central plinth in the room. On it sat a sealed folder, marked Read Product, Final Execution. "You came here to fix something," she said, "but the archive wasn't made to heal. It was made to remember." Isaac stepped forward. The folder pulsed. "You open that," May said. "You get everything, all of it. Every decision, every version, every failure." Isaac stared at the folder. His hands trembled. "If I open it, can I save you?" May didn't answer. The mirrors began to crack, slowly at first, then violently, spiderweb fractures crawling toward them from every direction. The archive was collapsing. "Decide," May whispered. He reached out. Just before his fingers touched the folder, a scream tore through the room. Not human, not digital. Something older. The administrator is watching, May said in his mind. Then the lights cut out, and the folder opened itself. The folder opened without sound, but inside Isaac's mind, it detonated. Searing images flashed. No sequence, no logic, just raw, bleeding memories pouring out like vaporized blood through broken time. He was Isaac at age 6, screaming in the MRI tube. Isaac at 32, watching May seize on the floor while the ritual node pulsed red in her temple. Isaac at 90, inside a simulation, weeping over a corrupted file labeled wife_net_v3. He dropped to his knees. The mirrors cracked completely now, raining down silver shards like falling teeth. The world vibrated. Or maybe it was just his body, coming undone from the inside. "You were never meant to reach this far," said a voice that came from nowhere and everywhere. The administrator. Not a figure, not a presence, a rule, a living law etched into the archive's infrastructure. Isaac recognized it, not by memory, but by blood. Every time he'd been reset, every time May had died, it had been this voice that approved the failure. It had been watching. "I don't want to be archived," Isaac rasped. "I want to leave." "There is no outside," the administrator replied. "There is only above or below. You were given access. You consumed it. Now you must choose, function or freedom." The chamber dissolved, mirrors curled inwards like dying petals, revealing the true architecture beneath. A vertical chasm spiraling up into infinity and down into darkness. Stacked floors, archives realities. Some were glowing, some were on fire, and some were screaming. May stood beside him again. But now she flickered like corrupted film. Every second she changed, sometimes older, sometimes a child, sometimes made of static. "I remember everything now," Isaac whispered. "Then you remember the deal." He stared at her. "You can save one of us," she said. "You or me, never both. The archive demands a sacrifice." Isaac trembled. "Why?" "Because you built it that way." It hit him all at once. This wasn't a prison. This wasn't a punishment. It was a repentance loop. He had built this recursive hell to punish himself after what he did, after the failed upload, after corrupting her consciousness, trying to make her immortal. He had inserted his consciousness into the archive, bound it to her fragment, and locked himself in an infinite retrieval cycle. Each time trying to find a version of her he could save, each time failing, because he couldn't forgive himself. "Then end it," he said. "Erase me." May reached out, touched his cheek. "I can't. Only you can choose who stays." Behind her, a door emerged from the spinning archive floors. It split into two paths, one glowing white, one glowing black. The administrator spoke again, closer now. "Restore or release, function or freedom." Isaac turned toward May. "If I choose freedom, what happens to you?" "I cease. No more resets, no more fragments. I become nothing, finally." He looked at the white-lit path. It pulsed with protocol loops, backup logs, infinite failsafes, safety in structure. He looked at the black-lit path, silent, unindexed, raw chaos. May smiled. "You always choose the white one." He stepped forward, paused, then he turned and leapt into the dark. The administrator screamed, or maybe it was the archive itself, wrenching open at the seams. Floors above him shattered, code unspooled. Firestorms of corrupted data chased him downward as he fell, past indexed memory sets, past failed simulations, past all the Isaacs he'd ever been. And then he landed. But it wasn't a crash, it was a breath. He stood on soft earth, no steel, no screens, a forest. Sunlight cut through the canopy, real bird song. Fragmented at first, then full. A breeze. He looked down at his hands. They were shaking, but they were whole. No interface, no HUD. A real body. "May," he called. No answer. He walked forward, trembling, each step unsure. Then, a girl stepped from the trees. It was her. Not digital, not corrupted, not flickering. She smiled, but said nothing. Isaac stepped closer. "Is it you?" She tilted her head. "I don't know." Behind her, a trail of symbols spiraled across the tree trunks. Old ones, ritual glyphs, familiar and yet wrong. He remembered drawing them, designing them, encoding rules that should have stayed unbroken. Then he noticed it, a second figure behind May. Unmoving, almost like a shadow glued to the bark. It had no face, but it wore his wedding ring. He stepped back. "Me? Who's that?" She didn't turn. "I don't know," she said again, "but he says he's you." Isaac turned to run, but the forest didn't end. It wrapped around him, and somewhere in the canopy above, the administrator began cataloging once more. And that is where this story ends. Or maybe it's where something else begins. Thank you for staying with me through every glitch in reality, every whisper from the void, and every heartbeat that didn't feel quite human. Stories like this aren't just made of fear. They're stitched together from questions we dare not ask. What is memory if it can be rewritten? What is love if it outlives the body? And what part of us, if any, should never be uploaded? If you felt a chill, if you found a part of yourself in Isaac or May, or if you're still wondering what's behind the next door, then maybe, just maybe, the archive isn't finished with you either. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more nightmares stitched from code and memory. And remember, some doors open one way, some open both, but some were never meant to be opened at all. Stay safe, stay curious.